Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the human beings for the purpose of attaining salvation in the hereafter. He wanted us to attain that position by our own choice, and therefore He didn't create us like robots. And this is where we see that the process of guidance has been there from day one. And once we accept the initial guidance, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us more tawfiq to understand more. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu. Allah is the master and the guardian of those who believe. يُخْرِجُهُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. He takes them out from the shades of darkness towards nur and light. The Prophet himself has been described in the Quran as doing the same function of taking the mu'mineen out of the levels of darkness to nur. And Hussein bin Ali is someone described by the Prophet as Husaynun minni. So Hussein ibn Ali, as well as his Azar, does the same function of taking us out from darkness towards nur. Salawat. This is where we need to cherish this institution known as Azadari. It's not just a ritual, it is actually a way of renewing our connection with our faith, with Imam, with Rasul, and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the institution of mass education for us. And keeping that in mind, that purpose of Azadari in mind, the general theme that I have is Karbala in our lives, where we talk about different issues, starting with the issue of, family ties, going on to halal, sustenance and risk, moving on to the issue of hidayat and guidance in form of tawfiq and khizlan, where we use the example of Hur and Umar ibn Sa'd. Then we went on to the theological issue of the necessity for the law of Ahl-e-Bait, and we went on to the implications of that. What does it mean to be a Shia of Ahl-e-Bait? We also on Saturday talked about the importance of education, especially Islamic schools in this part of the world. And last night we ended up with a discussion on the women of Karbala. Tonight I would like to actually go to a different theme, the way it was announced in the list which has been circulated, and that has to do with the youths. Keeping in mind the shuhada, the youth, young shuhada of Karbala. Salawat. You see, this issue of youths is very popular among speakers, among organizers, among the, critics who sit in the chair. Everything is about youths in our community. They say, oh, youths don't come to the Majlis. Somebody comes and visits a center for your first time. I say, well, I don't see the youths. Well, you come here, at least look at the whole package. Don't look at one event and start making a judgment. And so the topic is very, very common. But what I would like to do tonight is talk about the position of a youth and the responsibilities that come with that age. Normally in our society, especially South Asian culture, when we talk about Jawani and youth, the concept is that this is the time of freedom. You're free to do whatever you want. Sometimes when they do something wrong and you scold them, even the family members, not necessarily all of them, they will say, it's okay. अभी ये जवान है, बड़ा होने के बाद सही हो जाएगा. So the idea is, oh, he's still young. When he grows up, he will be fine. And so the youth age is considered to be, in our own culture, an era of freedom. You can do whatever you want to do. if you look at the society in the West, the way they look at, for example, the criminal system, they divide people into three categories. You have those who are minor, and then you have those who are adult. In between, you have those who are known as adolescent, Jawan. And even the criminal system in the Western societies treats the adolescents differently. They do something wrong, but the punishment would be less than if something else if an adult does the same thing. And so we see this partiality as far as the Western system is concerned in our own culture. Compared it to what is the perspective of Islam. Islam doesn't divide our life into child and adolescent and then, adult. You are either a minor or you are a baligh. There is nothing in between there. And so what that means is that when you become Jawan and a youth, you reach to that age, you are as much responsible as an adult. If you're 16-year-old, the sense of responsibility which has to be there in you is no different than somebody who is 60 years old. This is something we do not, think about it. Even when we talk about the process of education and things like that, and this is where we have to realize that, either you are nabaligh, you are not yet at the level of maturity from the Shari'i point of view, then you are free. But as soon as you become a baligh, then you are equally responsible in the eyes of Islam as a full-grown adult. Salawat. Let me explain to you one ayat from Surah Hadid, Surah number 57, ayat 20, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually has described the life in this dunya in 5 different ways. And we can relate that to the different ages that we have. Let me just give you the ayat and the translation first. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب ولهو وزينة وتخافر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد. Let's just look at the translation first, then I'll come to the explanation. Know that this word's life is only, number 1, la'ib, a play. Number 2, walahw, diversion. Number 3, wazinatun, an adornment. Number 4, takhafur baynakum, boasting among yourselves. And number 5, takasur fil amwali wal awlad. And, rivalry between yourself in having accumulated wealth and many, many children or grandchildren. Now, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you look at this perspective of dunya and the life in this dunya, كَمَثَلِ غَيْثٍ, this is just like the rain which comes down, and then it brings about the vegetation from the earth, and the kuffar look at it and they are very happy with that. But they do not realize that then that green grass or the vegetation will gradually turn yellow and die down. And what will happen in the akhirah? وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ عَذَابٌ شَدِيدٌ وَمَغْفِرَةٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرِضْوَانٌ. At the end, in the hereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that depending on how you live your life here, you have 2 choices. Either you will face عَذَابٌ شَدِيد, severe punishment, or maghfiratun min Allah wa ridwan, which means forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and even more importantly, ridwan, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ, and the life of this dunya is nothing but a process of deceit. Salawat. this dunya that Allah has described. He used different terms. And this is actually, I would call, this is a psychological way of looking at the human condition. The first one he says, you know, your hayat dunya is la'ib. La'ib means a play. And this actually refers to what we call infancy, shir kharagi, at that level. And this is based on the various tafsir. I'm just giving you a summary of what some of the great ulama have actually discussed this ayat in that way. So the first phase of life, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the hayat of dunya is la'ib, is a play, is referring to the infancy, which is really a play, nothing else. And then the second one, lahu. Lahu is diversion. You know, you're moving from one color to another, one thing to another. This refers to the childhood phase. You've already passed the infancy. Now you reach to a stage where you will see the children do not have the ability to focus on one thing. You know, today, you know, on one side there is a toy, a red color they like, and then they see another one, you know, yellow. You know, so that is the childhood phase where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it by lahu. Then we come to the third phase, which is the youth age, which has been described as zinatun. This is the age of a youth where he or she is, you know, obsessed with zinat, adornment and beauty. You know, those they at that age, what they look, what are they looking for? They want to look the best. Man, a boy and girl both. You know, that is the main issue, how I look. And then we come to the issue of, you know, tafakhur baynakum, and then you reach to the age of, you know, adulthood, you finish your education, you go into the world field, and you establish yourself. So this is tafakhurun baynakum. Then you say to one another, yes, I have done this, mashallah. You know, I have this degrees, I have this, you know, I have a house, I have established myself. And, you know, people do tafakhur, boasting among themselves to one another. And then you reach to a point where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَتَكَاثُرُ. Takathur here means basically, you know, again, boasting about, you know, you look at, this is the adult, you know, elderly stage, senior stage of life, the last stage, where you look back and you say, yes, mashallah, I have accumulated quite a lot. And my children, you know, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, these are the issues where you really, you know, take pride in yourself. And so when we look at these 5, you know, phases that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about hayat al-dunya, I would like to focus on the third one, which is the youth age, where the issue is of, you know, obsession with adornment and beauty of the person in different ways. Whether it has to do with the looks or the hairstyle or the clothes and this and that, you know, brown men, mashallah, we know all the problems. You know, you hear from many speakers. I don't want to go into that. But I would just like to concentrate on what should be the main issue as far as, you know, tarbiyat for the youth is concerned. Especially looking at the issue that, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not differentiate between a young person, a youth, and an adult. They are equally responsible in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat.
Nara Takbir! Nara Risalat! Nara
When we talk about tarbiyat of awlad, what what should be the most important quality that we have to inculcate in the minds of our young boys and girls? You might be surprised what I'm talking about. The word is taqwa, which is not part of the school supplies that we prepare for our children. It's not there in the bag. You know, when we talk about young people and taqwa, what is taqwa? Taqwa means righteousness. Taqwa means piety. Taqwa means God consciousness. Sometimes you will see in Quran the translations done by many translators of the Quran is that, ittaqullah, fear Allah, which is literally a correct translation, but that's not really the essence of it. The essence of it would be fearing displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't fear Allah as an entity. Allah is not like Saddam or Hitler that you have to be afraid of him. No. This is the relationship of love. I should fear displeasing him because I believe in him and I love him. Those who are close to us, when we love them, we are very careful. I don't want to say something which will hurt this person. I don't want to do something which will displease them. That's the demand of love. And so taqwa, fear, is not with the essence and person of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's more the fear for displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And especially when we use the word, God consciousness. That is actually a very complete meaning of the word taqwa. Let me just give you one, I have to be mindful of the time, but anyway, I'm here. And you are sitting there, so mashallah.
Hello.
When we say taqwa means God consciousness, to have this consciousness that He's there, He's part of my life. We in North America travel on highways, especially if you every day take the same route. You always know that at a certain point, the cop's car would be there with the camera or the radar. So you, like anyone else, is going over the speed limit. But then, when you reach to that, because you know He's present, your speed will automatically be reduced. Because you know He's there. In our life, when we commit sin, it's actually the sense of not having the consciousness of Allah's presence in our life at that moment. Anyone, me or you, whenever we commit sins, at that moment in my life, Allah was not in my mind and heart. Taqwa means to have that consciousness in all situations. And if you have that, then will be a strong element to prevent me from committing sins. And this is where we have to realize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullaha wabtaghu ilayhi al-wasila, O you who believe, fear displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The issue of taqwa is addressed to the mu'mineen. Mu'mineen, whether they are young or old, doesn't matter. وَابْتَغُوا إِلَيْهِ الْوَسِيلَةِ, and seek a wasila to reach to Him, even in acquiring taqwa. And therefore we follow Imam al-Muttaqeen. One of the titles of Ali besides Amir al-Mu'mineen is Imam al-Muttaqeen. Salawat. Another ayat. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullaha wa kunu ma'a as-sadiqin. O you who believe, fear displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be with the truthful ones. In Surah Hujarat, ayat number 40, Surah 49, ayat 13, Allah says, if you really want to see who is the most honorable person in the eyes of Allah, inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most honorable person in the eyes of Allah is the one who has, atqakum, the most righteous and pious person. And my question here is basically, is this ayat only addressing adults and old people? Or is it equally addressing the youths who have reached to the age of bulugh? Everyone. But in our culture, on a subconscious level, what do we say? Whenever we talk about taqwa, parhezgari, the image is, when I retire, I have nothing to do, I'll do taqwa. Somehow taqwa is now in our culture on a subconscious level is put in the category of the old people. When you have nothing to do, actually when you can't do anything, then you want to become parhezgar. Parhezgari, restraining yourself, is when you have the ability and you stop. Not only you're not able to do anything and then you say, I'm away. And this is where we realize taqwa is not for the old. It is for everyone. And even for the youths. Whether they are young or adult or elderly, everyone is mukallaf and responsible in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at the ayat of Quran. Let me give you some examples here. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Anbiya, there also, our image of when Musa alayhi salam, especially if you look at these documentary made by the Christians and others, you will see Musa alayhi salam with his asa and a wide beard. So the image of Musa is an old person. And this is the image, somehow, it comes in our mind. Ibrahim alayhi salam, same way. If you look at Ibrahim alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about his first struggle against idol worshippers. When he smashed their idol and left the big one there with the axe on his shoulder. Just to force the people to think and reflect on this issue. What did they say when they came back and they saw, somebody has destroyed our idols? They said, who would have done this? The response was, قَالُوا سَمِعْنَا فَتًى يَذْكُرُ. They said that, we have heard a young man, a youth, talking ill about them. And they were referring to Ibrahim. And he is known by the name Ibrahim, and they took him, and the whole story of how they wanted to punish him, and Allah, rescued him. So the struggle of Ibrahim alayhi salam starts when he is still fatan. He is a young youth. Ismail alayhi salam. When did he start his work? Helping his father, and even the willingness to become a sacrifice. فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ مَعَهُ السَّعِي. When his son reached to the age where he could work with him. We're talking about a youth. And the whole exercise of sacrifice was at the time when Ismail was very young. And look at the response. There's quite a lot to say about it, but even if you look at the way Ibrahim alayhi salam saw the dream once, twice, 3 times. Anbiya don't see the dream after biryani, like us. For them, dream are a means of communication between Allah and them. So he saw this dream that he is sacrificing his son 3 times. So then eventually he talked with his son. See, the tarbiyat comes in. He doesn't say, okay, now you have to do this. He says, what do you think about it, oh my son? This is what I've been seeing in the dream. And basically he wants Ismail to also buy into this plan. Not impose on him by force. And this is where he turns around and says, you know, oh Father, do what you have been commanded to do. سَتَجِدَنِي إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ مِنَ الصَّابِرِينَ. You will find me among those who are patient. And so this is the stage of the Anbiya when they were still very, very young, middle teens. And then you see Yusuf alayhi salam. The most serious challenge that our youth have now, especially in this era of freedom, there are no restrictions for anything, is to restrain yourself. And this is Yusuf alayhi salam as a young man. There was no problem there in this situation, and you know the story, I don't want to go into detail. But the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes, again, meaning of taqwa comes in, that there was nobody. The queen was there, the doors were closed, nobody to see. But what happens? وَلَوْلَا أَنْ رَأَى بُرْهَانَ رَبِّهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the state of Yusuf, that if he had not seen the proof from his Lord, it means if you had that consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is the Burhan. That will prevent you from committing sin. He was infallible. But this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has described his situation. Musa alayhi salam, raised in the palace of Fir'aun. It's only when he becomes, a young boy, maybe late teens, this is where he ventures outside the palace. And he saw a situation where he ended up supporting somebody who was being beaten up. And, it created problems for him. He ran away, went to Madian. And the whole story about how he helped the daughters of Prophet Shu'aib, and then eventually ended up marrying one of them, living with Prophet Shu'aib for 10 years. This is the stage where Musa alayhi salam is young. And so when you look at the Anbiya, you see that, they were not, they didn't start their life and their mission when they were old. Many of them started their work when they were still young. Salawat Let me look at the example of our Imams. Just one thing. When we talk about the concept of Imamat, we believe in the 12 Imams. We believe that they are Mansoors min Allah. Means they have been appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Prophet. The appointment comes from Allah through the Prophet. And all of them have been blessed with the ability of infallibility, ismat, as well as knowledge and fadilah. On the level of knowledge, all the A'imma and the Imams are on the same level. Of course, Rasulullah and Amir al-Mu'minin have their own status. But the ilm which was given to Amir al-Mu'minin is also given to Imam Muhammad Ali al-Naqi, for example. And so on the level of ilm, they are not different. Yet, if you look at the titles used for them, even by the Imams who came later on, when they will talk about the Imams who were before, these titles we didn't invent, you will see that all of them have good fada'il, good qualities, good virtues. But everyone is known by one specific title. When it comes to Ali, we say Al-Murtaza. When it comes to the second Imam, we say Al-Mushtaba. When it comes to Hussein, we say Al-Shaheed. Fourth Imam, we say Sajjad. The fifth Imam, we say Baqir, referring to the, somebody who dug up the knowledge for the people. The sixth Imam, As-Sadiq, the truthful one. Seventh Imam, Al-Kadhib. Eighth Imam, Al-Rida. Ninth Imam, Al-Taqi. 10th Imam, Al-Naqi. And, so when you look at all these titles, when you say As-Sajjad to the fourth Imam, was Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq not Sajjad? They are all interchangeable. Each one of them is Sajjad. Each one of them is Baqir Ulum al-Nabiyyin. As-Sadiq is not only for the sixth Imam. Everybody is Sadiq among them. But every imam, we use a specific title for them. My point is the 9th imam. What do we call him? Imam Muhammad?
Taqi.
Muhammad al-Taqi. That title comes from taqwa.
Taqwa.
There is no hadith that I'm basing these words. This is my observation of this al-qab of the A'immah. You know, when I look at the life of the Imam, I see that from Amir al-Mu'mineen to the 7th Imam, their era of Imamate started when they were either in early 30s or 20s. The youngest one would be the 7th Imam when he was about 18 or 19 years old. But if you look at Imam Syed alayhi salam, you know, his Imamate starts when he is already in 30s. Amir al-Mu'mineen is already in mid-20s. So all the Imams, from Amir al-Mu'mineen to Imam al-Rada alayhi salam, their Imamate started when they were already adult. All of a sudden, when you come to the 9th Imam, his Imamate started when he was 7 or 8 years old. A child. Not even about it. Yet we call him At-Taqi. Ali is Imam al-Muttaqi. Imam Hassan also is Muttaqi. Hussein is also Taqwa. But this title has been fixed for the 9th Imam. Why? As I said, there's no hadith. It's kind of probably, I took this as a lesson, as a message for us, that taqwa is not for the adults only. Taqwa is even for the young people, because even our youngest Imam, who became Imam at the age of 8, has the title of At-Taqi. Salawat.
نعرة التكبير نعرة الرسالة نعرة حيدري
So taqwa and, you know, being God conscious or to be pious and righteous is not for the old age. It is for all ages, especially for the young people. Even among the ashab of Rasulullah, if you look at the examples. You know, one of the youngest one at the time was Ammar. Mus'ab bin Umair, Ammar, they're all young Sahaba of Rasulullah. Ammar, we know his background. He and his parents, Yasir and Sumayya, came from the class of society where they didn't have that much protection. They were actually clients of another tribe. They didn't have that strong supporter from the local tribe because they didn't belong to that local tribes of Mecca. And so when they became Muslim, the tribe who was supposed to provide security were actually enemies of Rasulullah. And they started put pressuring on them to renounce Islam to the extent of torturing them to death. Yasir and Sumayya. And Ammar was a young person. He saw his father and mother being killed brutally. And this is where he uttered the words of kufr to save himself. And he comes to Rasulullah crying. He said, you know, I was forced to utter the words of kufr so that they would, you know, leave me alone. But I feel very bad about it, feel guilty about it. And that's where the ayat of Quran came about the issue of taqiyya. That in such cases where you want to protect and save your life, you are allowed to utter the words of kufr. And this is the concept which we in Shia madhab, we believe in it as taqiyya. And this is where we see that he was very close to the Prophet. After the hijrah, He was very enthusiastic in building the Masjid al-Nabi. Everybody would, for example, help out in that. But he would take extra burden, instead of one brick, he would take 2 bricks. And so some of these Banu Umayyah, elders started joking about him, ridiculing him. And when Rasulullah saw that, he comes close to Ammar, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and he said, leave him alone. And then he says, and this is Sahih Bukhari's words, where the Prophet says to the other Sahaba, تَقْتُلُهُ الْفَأَةُ الْبَاغِيَةُ. Ammar is a person who's a rebellious group will kill him. While Ammar يَدْعُوهُمْ إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ, while Ammar would be calling them towards Jannah, وَيَدْعُونَهُ إِلَى النَّارِ, while the other group would be calling him towards Jahannam. And so this is the status of these who were young at that time. Of course, with time he becomes old. He was there in Siffin. And these words of Rasulullah, which is also there in Sahih Bukhari, that the rebellious group will kill him, those who will be calling him towards Jahannam. When he was killed by the forces of Muawiyah in the battle of Siffin, those who killed him, there were 2 fellows. They came to the tent of Muawiyah fighting with one another that, I should get the reward, or I should be the one who can hold the head of Ammar. And at that time, Abdullah bin Amr ibn Sa'd, the famous advisor of Muawiyah, Amr ibn Sa'd, his son Abdullah, who he was sitting there, and he said, I'm amazed at you people. You're fighting for the head of Ammar. Don't you remember this hadith of Rasulullah? That the people who will kill him will be the rebellious group. And this hadith, which had been forgotten, all of a sudden, became wildfire in the camp of Muawiyah. He became very angry. He said to Amr ibn Sa'd, can't you control your son? Does he have to, say every hadith that he heard from Rasulullah? Mm-hmm. And then he, Amr ibn Sa'd said, okay, we can do damage control. Go and tell your people that the person responsible for the murder of Ammar is the one who brought him to Siffin. Trying to deflect that from himself to Amir al-Mu'mineen. And when Amir al-Mu'mineen heard about it, he said it means that, the person responsible for the shahadat of Hamza was the Prophet, because he brought him to Uhud there. And this is where we see, this whole issue of, leveling others in that way. This is the Umayyad style. It's nothing new that we see during our run time. Salawat.